Before she left, she placed her hand over his chest, where his heart still thrashed between war and loneliness. "Let me touch you there," she said. "Let me touch the place no one ever has." Those words followed Eli Nash through the long miles of wilderness, across burning deserts, and through the maps he drew for the powerful, and the hope he buried for the weak. He never thought that same hand, Ciala Greywind, the Apache warrior, would one day pull him back from the edge of damnation, to seek with him the river beneath the earth, the true lifeblood of the West. But every step they took was a bullet waiting. Every border he drew erased another soul from its motherland. And when the guns finally roared, only her voice remained, echoing through the wind. "Let me touch you there." Not a lover's whisper, but a prayer between man and the earth. The afternoon sun bled across the prairie like an open wound. Wind carried dust and the scent of scorched grass, whispering through the brittle cacti that creaked like old bones. At the end of a winding dirt trail, Eli Nash appeared, lean, worn, his long coat frayed at the edges, a heavy leather satchel slung over one shoulder, and his hand never far from the rusted revolver on his hip. He'd been riding for days, not sure if he was still running from something, or toward it. Every step drew him closer to the land of memory, the place where Ciala Greywind once stood against the wind, laid her hand on his chest, and said, her voice low and steady like an Apache drumbeat, "Let me touch you there." Those words still echoed in his mind, not just as a farewell, but as a curse. To touch the place no one ever has, his heart, the thing he thought he'd lost long ago. Ahead, Father Tomas's old chapel rose from the barren land, broken, lonely, but still standing, crumbling walls, a tilted bell tower. Yet beneath the ruin lingered the dignity of what once was called the last home of lost souls. Eli reined in his horse. The thin beast snorted, breath clouding in the dusk. He dismounted, laid a hand on the rotted door, and pushed. The hinges groaned like tired ghosts. Inside, the last light poured through shattered windows, turning the dust into golden fire. He walked through the nave, where once there'd been an altar, now only a broken cross. From his satchel he drew an old map, edges soaked with rain and ash. It was all Ciala had left him. That, and a promise. "When you reach this place, I'll be waiting." He smiled faintly, a weary, believing kind of smile. How many months had it been since that border farewell? He didn't know. Only that in this dry, dying land, her memory still burned hotter than any flame. He set camp right there in the chapel's nave, building a small fire from brittle twigs. The flickering light painted red across the walls, making the broken cross seem to kneel like a penitent shadow. He sat beside the fire, sipped the last of his water, and stared into the night beyond the open door, listening. The desert had its own silence, wind whistling through stone cracks, sand scraping across the floor, the sound of a man's loneliness breathing in the dark. He drew his revolver, wiped it clean with an old cloth, a ritual before rest. In the firelight, Ciala's face came back to him, tall, strong-shouldered, eyes dark as canyon pools. "If I don't come back," he had once asked her, "then this land will remember you," she said, "and so will I." The wind shifted, cold and damp. Eli's fingers brushed the scratch on his gun's handle, where she had carved her tribe's mark. Outside, the sky sank into blackness, but inside his chest, that small flame of promise still refused to die. Night fell slow over the wasteland, laying a thick hush like ash. Inside the ruined chapel, Eli Nash sat beside his flickering fire. The light licked the cracked walls, making them seem to breathe. Wind slipped through the doorway, carrying a long, low howl, like the prayers of the dead. He listened to the silence, until another sound broke through. Hoofbeats. Far at first, then closer. Eli was on his feet in an instant. His hand found the revolver, reflex born from years of fear. The firelight danced across his wrist veins. The horse stopped. A pause. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Not lost. Not wandering. Someone was coming for him. He stamped the fire out with his boot. Darkness swallowed the room. His breath felt thick as smoke. The chapel door creaked open, letting in a blade of moonlight across the dusty floor. A tall figure stepped into the silver glow. Eli's finger tightened on the trigger. Then came a voice, rough but laced with a grin he knew too well. "You almost shot the only friend you've got, little cowboy." Saala Greywind. She stood there like she'd walked out of a dream. Shoulders bleeding dark, blood tracing down her arm. Her sun-worn face, eyes deep as canyon shadows. Not accusing, but burning with that fierce pride only the living earn. Eli lowered his gun slowly, throat dry. "I thought you were dead?" She cut him off, stepping forward into the moonlight. "Not that easy. But they're close behind." "They?" Eli's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Hunters," she said, "of men, and worse, of souls." She opened her hand. In her palm lay a small stone, glowing faintly blue, like the breath of the earth itself. "Spirit stone," she said, "sacred to the Hawk clan. Whoever holds it can find the eternal river under this desert. But the others, they'd sell it to the railroad kings." Eli looked from the stone to her eyes. Then he understood. The blood on her arm, the fire in her gaze. She wasn't just running. She was guarding an ancient faith the world had long forgotten. The wind rose, carrying dust and the far-off cry of coyotes. Siala staggered to the wall, breath ragged. Eli rushed to her, tearing a strip from his sleeve to bind the wound. His hand brushed her skin. She flinched, eyes blazing. "Careful, cowboy. Not everyone who touches Apache blood gets to live." He paused, then said softly, "Then let the blood know I stand with it." Silence hung heavy between them, thick as the desert night. Outside, hoofbeats echoed again. More of them this time. Closer. Faster. Siala looked up, her voice low and hard as steel. "If you want to live, get ready. But if you want to believe, stay." Eli gripped his revolver. Moonlight cast their shadows on the wall. One tall, one lean, both ready. The night wasn't quiet anymore. It was waiting to explode. If it were you, which side would you stand on? A. Eli Nash, the man who stayed on the edge of faith. B. Siala Greywind, the woman of war and ancient curse. Or C. Something else entirely? Tell me. Let me know you're still out there, riding with us. That night, the fire inside the ruined chapel burned down to embers. Outside, wind hissed through the fallen bell tower, striking the hardened adobe walls and echoing like the sigh of something long dead. Eli Nash sat with his back against a cracked stone pillar. Before him lay his old map, the paper frayed, the ink-stained lines tangled like a web of fate. He stared in silence, eyes following the flicker of firelight over the marks he'd once drawn with precision, borders he'd believed were right. Now, they looked more like wounds carved into the earth. Across from him, Siala Greywind sat cross-legged on a thick pelt laid over broken tiles. She spread before her several fragments marked with charcoal and stone, ancient symbols of the Hawk clan, spirals for water, lines for paths, and an open hand facing east. Without a word, she pushed the hide toward him. Eli leaned in. In the dim light, the two maps, one drawn by a white man, one kept by the Apache, overlapped almost perfectly. Mountains, rivers, valleys, all the same. Only the language was different. He looked up, surprised. How did you know these landmarks? Ciala smiled faintly, pride mixed with something far older, sadder. My people don't draw borders, Eli. We remember the way. The land remembers our footsteps. The water remembers our songs. Every river, every dune has a name and a spirit. She took a piece of charcoal and drew a spiral on the wall, the sacred symbol of the underground river. Your world draws borders, she said quietly. Mine remembers paths. Her words hung in the air, blending with the moan of the wind. Eli glanced back at his own map, straight, cold lines measured by compass and coin. Suddenly they felt meaningless. He saw the railway he'd mapped, the one that paid him so well, for what it was. A blade slicing through this land, dividing the sacred hills the Apache called their flesh. If I could prove this route can shift west, he murmured. Maybe they'd spare your ground. Ciala studied him, her eyes dark as obsidian. Your iron snake doesn't change course for prayers, she said. It moves only when it smells profit. Eli was silent, then nodded. Then we'll show them profit. He adjusted his map, measuring slopes, river veins, soft soil. Ciala leaned close, pointing to her clan's markings. Here, the underground river flows below. If they dig through it, the land will collapse. But if the rails curve west, the line still connects both towns and leaves the sacred ground untouched. Two hands, one sunburned and rough, one dark and scarred, hovered close over the maps. Ink lines and charcoal marks blended together. Two worlds trying to share the same story. The firelight danced over their faces. Ciala's rare smile flickered in the glow, and Eli's eyes held a quiet resolve. For a brief moment, there were no conquerors, no conquered, only two souls bound by the same vow. They would not let the land die of thirst. Dawn crept in through the shattered window, the first light sliding through dust to rest on Ciala Greywind's hair. She lay beside the dead fire, breathing evenly, her face soft for the first time after so many nights on the run. The morning sun gilded her skin, copper, with a hint of red, as if forged from earth and flame. Eli stood motionless, caught by the sight of her. He had always thought beauty was something fragile, the pale women in bright dresses back east. But Ciala was something else entirely. Beautiful the way a mountain is beautiful, raw, dangerous, unyielding. Her beauty didn't invite, it warned, and that somehow made him unable to look away. The sunlight caught on the beaded necklace around her neck, small stones etched with the same ancient symbols, reflecting a faint blue light. The same hue he'd seen the night before, glowing from the spirit stone in her hand. He leaned closer, curious. Something in him, the explorer, or maybe just the man, wanted to understand her. This woman who slept beside him and still felt a world away. Gently, he reached out, his fingertip brushing the central bead when, "Don't." The word cut like a blade. Ciala's eyes snapped open, sharp, clear, and cold. In the morning light they seemed to pierce through him, straight into his thoughts. I just wanted to see." "Touch that again, cowboy," she said, voice low and deliberate, "and the spirits will touch you back." Eli froze, his hand falling away. She sat up, her hair tumbling over her shoulders, the small scars on her arms catching the light. Her fingers wrapped tightly around the necklace, as if to keep it from vanishing. "What is it?" he asked softly. "Not something to ask," she replied. "Not something to own. It's the key to the river beneath this desert. My people call it the Eye of the Hawk. Only the chosen may touch it. If another does, the water changes course and disappears forever." Eli swallowed hard. Suddenly he understood. The blood, the chase, the weight of her silence. He looked down at his own map, at the lines and figures, and realized they were nothing but cuts on a living body. Siala's gaze softened, just a little. You don't understand, Eli. Your people see land as something to measure. We see it as blood and bone. He lowered his head. Maybe. I'm learning. She said nothing for a while. Then she rose and walked toward the chapel door. The sunlight poured over the earth outside, wind lifting dust into spirals around her boots. Eli watched her go, knowing that between them now lay more than a promise. There was a border thin as faith, sharp as desire. If it were you, which side would you stand on? A. Eli Nash, the man learning to respect what he cannot understand. B. Siala Greywind, the woman who carries the strength of the earth and an ancient faith. Or C. Something else? Tell me. Let me know you're still riding with the story. Dawn bled out across the sunburnt ridges, the sky washed in tarnished copper, and the land below cracked open like an old wound refusing to heal. Eli Nash and Siala Greywind left the chapel at first light, mist still clinging to the cacti. On their backs, a little water, a strip of dried meat, and a map now smudged with soot. They didn't talk much. Out here, every word could turn into an echo that led someone right to them. Siala walked ahead, her steps soundless. Bare feet brushed over stone and sand, as if she were walking on the skin of her ancestors. Eli tried to mimic her, but his old cowboy boots betrayed him, each step loud and clumsy, leaving a trail behind like spilled secrets. She turned, eyes narrowing. You leave tracks like a wounded deer, she murmured. I was born in a town, not in the brush, Eli said, half joking, half ashamed. Then learn, she replied calmly. Out here, to live, you have to listen to the land. She knelt, pressed her palm against the sand. When the wind blows like this, footprints fade in an hour. But when the air's still, the sand keeps your trail all day. She showed him how to walk on rock instead of dirt, how to pull a dead cactus branch over the places they'd passed. The earth remembers, she said. It remembers friend and enemy alike. Eli followed her lead, slower now, more careful. At times, he could almost feel the earth's pulse beneath his boots, a deep, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of some ancient giant. In that moment, he understood what she'd meant the night before. The land is blood and bone, and for the first time in his life, he felt not like a trespasser, but like a part of something alive. They descended into a canyon, where sunlight narrowed to a thin thread between the cliffs. The air grew heavy, heat radiating from the rocks, until sweat stung their skin. The wind carried, whispers, a low hum that could have been voices, or ghosts. Siala stopped, tilting her head. Her eyes closed, her breath slowed. Eli froze beside her, hearing only his own pulse. Then she whispered, barely audible, horses, many. She crouched low, hand gripping her bowstring. Eli strained to listen, and then he heard it too. Hoofbeats, distant but steady, like heavy rain striking stone. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder and horsehide. How far? He asked. Less than a mile, she said, eyes fixed eastward. They're following our trail. Eli's throat tightened. Our trail? She nodded. Her voice dropped lower, darker. Crow Wolf. He's of my blood, but no longer my brother. Half Apache, half white. Now a hunter of men. He doesn't forget my tracks. The name, Crow Wolf, hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Eli met her gaze and saw it. That fierce light before thunder strikes. Can we hide? He asked. No, she said, stringing her bow. We can only make the earth swallow our trail, and pray the wind holds still. The canyon fell silent. Even the air stopped moving. In that breathless stillness, The hoofbeats grew louder, closer, pounding like war drums. The hunt had arrived. Night draped the canyon in steel-gray cold. The wind whistled through the cracks, carrying the damp scent of sand and mist. Eli Nash and Ciala Greywind slipped into a narrow cave, the entrance so tight a man had to bow to pass through. Inside, the dark was thick enough to choke. A dying ember glowed faintly, each breath turning to pale smoke. Ciala sat by the wall, quietly unstringing her bow, wiping her blade with a scrap of dark cloth. Her black hair hung wet with dew, the droplets tracing the curve of her neck, catching the ember's glow. Eli sat across from her, his back pressed against the cold stone. The chill crept through his coat, down to the bone. "This cave," he muttered, "feels like a grave." She looked up, expression unreadable. Then, without hesitation, she moved closer. "Body heat," she said simply. Before Eli could react, she was beside him, their backs pressed together, their breaths finding the same rhythm. Her warmth spread through him, steady, grounding, alive. He shivered, but not from cold. In the darkness, he could hear her heartbeat. Slow, certain. "You're always this calm?" he asked softly, half to distract himself. "Apache learned silence before speech," she said. "Silence lets you hear what's real." "What's real?" "The truth." Silence again. Outside, hoofbeats echoed faint and hollow through the cliffs, a funeral rhythm for the hunted. Eli's hand tightened on his revolver. "You said Crow Wolf knows your tracks. Who is he, really?" Ciala didn't answer right away. She looked toward the cave mouth, where moonlight crept across the stone like a blade. Her face hardened. Her voice came low and even. "He was my blood," she said. "My brother. Same mother. Different fathers." Eli froze. "Your brother? But he hunts you, huh? Hunts your people?" "Yes," she said, her tone flat as wind. "Crow Wolf chose another path. When the soldiers came, he bent the knee. They gave him gold, a white man's name, and the right to live. In return, he hunts those who raised him." Her fingers closed tight around the knife, knuckles pale. "I once believed he'd protect the clan. But you know, Eli," she looked down at her scarred hands, "sometimes blood betrays faster than any enemy." Eli said nothing. In the fading glow, he saw the long scar on her shoulder, deep, old. He didn't need to ask who'd carved it there. "Do you think he can ever be saved?" he asked quietly. "It's not him that needs saving," she said. "It's this land." The wind rose again, carrying the cry of a coyote through the canyons. Ciala pulled her cloak tighter, wrapping it over both their shoulders. The warmth gathered between them, but in her eyes was another kind of cold, the kind that comes from losing everything and still standing tall. Eli turned to look at her, her face etched by moonlight. He understood then. Inside this Apache woman lived a storm, bound, silent, waiting. And maybe that storm would decide both their fates. If it were you, which side would you stand on? A. Eli Nash, the man learning to believe in what he cannot yet understand. B. Ciala Greywind, the woman bound by blood feud and a vow to the land. Or C. Something else? Tell me. Let me know you're still riding with the story. The sky burned red with sunset. Light, both beautiful and cruel. The wind carried the smell of smoke and rusted iron. From the ridge, Eli Nash and Ciala Greywind lay flat against the rock, peering down into the valley below, where a cavalry company had made camp. Inside the ring of horses and guards knelt a group of Apache women and children, their wrists bound, their knees pressed to the cracked, dry earth. A child cried out, only to be silenced by the swing of a rifle butt. The sight alone made the wind hold its breath. Ciala's body tensed like a drawn bow, her hand clenched around her knife, eyes burning like coals in the firelight. "My people," she whispered, voice steady, but with a weight that could crush stone. Eli followed her gaze. Down below stood Captain Randall, blue uniform dusted brown, helmet gleaming in the dying light. He was talking to someone, and then Eli saw him. Crow Wolf, the half-blood turncoat with that crooked smile, the one that made sin look easy. "We have to do something," Ciala said, hand already resting on her bow. "Do what?" Eli hissed. "You going to shoot an entire regiment? They've got horses, guns, fire. We've got 2 lives and bad luck." "2 lives," she said evenly, "but 1 reason." Her eyes never left the captives. "I won't let them be led away like cattle." Eli took a slow breath. He knew that look. Not rage, but resolve carved deep into the bone. He laid a hand on her shoulder, murmuring, "Ciala, listen to me. We can't fight a whole army." She turned to him, eyes bright and voice rough as gravel. "Then we make them fight themselves." The words fell between them like a spark in a powder keg. Eli looked down again at the camp, the line of tethered horses, the rows of tents, the drunken soldiers laughing around the fire. Then he saw it. The weak link. The horses. He met Ciala's eyes. She had already seen it too. "If the horses stampede, the soldiers lose control," he said quietly. "They'll panic. That's when you free your people." "But we need something to scare them." Eli touched the revolver at his belt. "I think I've got something loud enough." Ciala gave him a small, fierce smile, her first in days. "Finally," she said, "the cowboy uses his head instead of his heart." They studied the camp, distances, guards, the wind's direction, the layout of tents. Eli noted the slope, the corral near the stream, the nearest guard posts. A reckless plan was taking shape, born out of desperation and the dark. When the moon began to rise, Eli glanced at her. "If this goes wrong, you know what happens." "I know," she said, voice solid as stone. "But if we do nothing, I'll die another way. Slower, smaller." He nodded. And in that moment, beneath the endless sky and the whispering canyon wind, 2 fugitives decided to start a war they couldn't win, just to buy others a chance to live. Below, the cavalry fires glowed bright and steady. Above, 2 outlaws began weaving a storm of hooves that would erase the line between hunter and hunted. Night sank over the valley like a steel shroud. The moon disappeared behind clouds, and only the campfires burned, red eyes glaring up at the cliffs. Eli Nash lay prone on the ridge, revolver loaded, breath steady but uncertain. Below, more than 20 soldiers lounged around the fire, drunk and laughing, unaware death had them in its sights. Ciala crawled up beside him, her voice low and calm as a forest wind. "Just a few minutes," she said. "Once they break, I go in." "Few minutes?" he muttered. "That's all we'll have. That's all we need." He nodded, tightening his grip. 6 bullets. That was it. His eyes fixed on the line of horses by the stream. Ciala gave a single nod and vanished into the dark, melting into it like smoke. Eli aimed. The wind shifted, bringing the scent of whiskey, sweat, and burning leather. He drew a breath, then fired. Bang! The first shot tore through the night. A horse screamed, rearing up, snapping its reins. Then another shot, and another. 6 in all. Each crack echoed off the canyon walls, multiplying into thunder. The herd exploded. Hooves pounded, ropes snapped, firelight shattered in the chaos. Soldiers shouted, collided, fired blindly into the dark. A barrel went up in flames, and the blaze roared higher, spreading from tent to tent like a living thing. Amid the chaos, Ciala charged. She moved like an arrow through the smoke, cutting bonds, shouting in her native tongue, driving the captives toward the northern ridge. A bullet grazed her shoulder. Blood splattered, but she didn't slow. From above, Eli watched, heart hammering. Then he saw something. A map spread across a command table, half buried under burning canvas. Even from here, the pen strokes looked familiar. He slid down the slope, crashing through smoke and heat. When he reached the flames, Captain Randall's voice rose over the chaos. "Follow the coordinates. Push through the river basin. Burn every Apache camp in your path." Eli froze. The map, his map, lay before him. The one he'd drawn months ago for the railroad survey. Clean lines, precise markings, now turned into a roadmap for slaughter. In the corner, the railroad's red seal. Beneath it, surveyed by E. Nash, his own name, stamped into the instrument of their destruction. His chest tightened. Without a word, he tore the map free, threw it into the fire. The paper curled, blackened, burned bright, a confession consumed by flame. In the distance, Ciala led her people toward the ridge, her voice rising over the chaos. She turned once, eyes catching his through the smoke. In them, firelight. Not just the fire of battle, but the fragile gleam of belief that a man might still redeem himself through what he chooses next. Eli ran. Toward her, away from everything else, away from the roar of horses, the screams, the fire. Behind him, the valley boiled in chaos, a storm of shadows and flames swallowing the night, erasing every border ever drawn. If it were you, which side would you stand on? A. Eli Nash, the man facing the sins he helped create. B. Ciala Greywind, the woman who fights to save even those who betrayed her. Or C. Something else? Tell me. Let me know you're still out there, riding with the story. The sun rose slow after a night of fire. Golden light caught the smoke drifting from the valley where Captain Randall's camp lay in ashes. Eli Nash and Ciala Greywind led the surviving Apache women and children up the blood-stained slope of the Red Mountain. The wind carried iron and ash, a promise the war was not yet over. By midday, they reached towering cliffs of red stone, sharp as blades, their caves like watching eyes. Ciala paused in reverence. "This is Hawk Clan land," she whispered. "They said a living river sleeps beneath the earth." From the cave emerged Gray Elk, last elder of the Hawk clan, hair white as dust, eyes black as obsidian. He looked through them as if weighing their souls. "Daughter of the storm," he said to Ciala, "and the man of maps." Ciala bowed. "Gray Elk, we seek the sacred water. My people have died for this land." He led them into a labyrinth of glowing stone, its walls carved with spirals and rivers. Eli froze. The markings matched his map exactly, except this one traced a hidden underground river. "That's impossible," he murmured. "I surveyed this land. There's no water." Gray Elk laughed, rough as gravel. "You measured with tools. Water listens only to spirit." He scattered red dust, and the wind spun it to a single point deep in the cave. "The river is real," he said, "but it opens only to sacrifice. Seek it with greed, and you will die of thirst." Silence fell. Deep beneath them came a faint pulse like a hidden heartbeat. Eli looked at his hands. Once proud for drawing maps, now stained by greed. For the first time they felt unclean. Ciala touched his shoulder. "Maybe the river is also in what we choose." Mist curled from the cave's depths. A trickle of water stirred alive. But then the wind carried a harsher sound. Hooves, steel, and a voice booming through the stone. "Ciala, daughter of the storm, come out before I bring this mountain down." Crow Wolf. Torches flared at the entrance. Eli gripped his revolver. Ciala's face glowed bronze in the firelight, fierce yet shadowed by sorrow. "They've found us," she said calmly. "Take the map. Lead them out. Don't look back." "No," Eli said. "We go together." She shook her head. "Eli, I was born to guard this land. You were born to tell its story. Don't let my blood be wasted." Shadows raced closer, She shoved him toward a narrow tunnel. Go! He hesitated, memory flashing of her hand on his chest, her whispered words. The ache now tore at him. She snatched his gun and smiled. Calm. Fatal. I was born to fight. You were born to draw. Finish this. The first shot cracked. Sparks lit her face in fire and resolve. Crow Wolf stepped through the smoke, eyes burning. You still don't see, he growled. There's no place for us. Whites trust paper, not blood. Ciala's bullet split stone near his head. I don't need their trust. I just need the earth to remember me. Gunfire roared. The cavern shook with thunder and smoke. Ciala moved like a spirit of war, striking fast. Eli pressed against the stone, torn by her last words. Tell this story. Then an oil barrel burst. Fire rolled through the cave, painting the cliffs in blood and gold. In that blaze, Ciala stood radiant, sacred, unyielding. Eli turned at last, clutching the map, and ran into the mountain's heart. Behind him, her gunfire clashed with Crow Wolf's roar, bloodlines colliding in fire. The mountain trembled, ash filling the air. And through the chaos rose a final sound, the haunting song of an Apache woman, carried on the wind like a prayer. If it were you, which side would you stand on? A. Eli Nash, the man who drew hope. B. Ciala Greywind, the woman who fought for the soul of the earth. Or C. Something else? Tell me. Let me know. You're still out there, following the story. Smoke was so thick, Eli could no longer tell fire from stone. The mountain groaned under the weight of battle. He pushed the last of the Hawk clan survivors through the narrow fissure toward the open air, where hot wind and ash swirled together. Below, gunfire roared with the hoarse cries of Crow Wolf. Eli turned back, firelight painting his dust-streaked face in red and gold. He knew Ciala was still down there. Gray elk, he shouted through the smoke, voice cracking. Take them! Don't stop! The old man's eyes glinted through the haze. If you go back, he said, bring her spirit back with the light. Eli gripped his revolver, the old worn thing that had seen too much, and plunged down into the burning dark. Inside the cavern, red pillars of rock collapsed one after another. Amid the inferno stood Ciala Greywind, her body bloodied, her eyes still blazing, face to face with her brother turned traitor. You should have died with them long ago, Crow Wolf snarled. And you, she said, voice rough as gravel, died the day you sold your soul for gold. They both fired. Crow Wolf staggered back, a bullet through his chest. Ciala's shoulder exploded in blood, flinging her toward the cliff's edge. Ciala! Eli leapt through the smoke, catching her hand as ash rained down around them. Let me touch you there, he gasped. One last time. She gave a faint, broken smile. No, cowboy, she whispered. This time, I'll hold you. Her grip tightened, pulling him up. Behind them, fire roared higher, illuminating their silhouettes suspended over the abyss. Crow Wolf stumbled, falling backward into the pit below, the place Gray Elk had called, where the brave surrender themselves. His scream vanished into the depths. The shaking stopped. The wind changed, and from the heart of the mountain rose a cool breath, damp and alive. Eli hauled Ciala to solid ground. They collapsed together, choking on smoke. From the fissures in the rock, white mist began to rise, the underground river awakening. Ciala's hand found his. Now, she said softly, you've touched something no map could ever draw. Eli looked at her, eyes burning. And you, he whispered, you're the only map I ever wanted to follow. Dawn broke through the cave mouth, golden and slow. Eli helped her to her feet. Her shoulder still bled, but her eyes were alive. The survivors stood silently at the ridge, facing south. It's over, Eli said. Ciala shook her head. No, it's just begun. She knelt, pressing her palm to the damp ground. The earth breathes again. The ancestors heard us. Sunlight caught the depths below, revealing Crow Wolf's body half submerged in the river. The current pulled him away, drawing his sins back into the earth, the very river he'd tried to own. The eternal river, Eli murmured. Not for those who chase it with greed, Ciala answered. Cold wind swept the ashes upward, like freed spirits rising to the sky. Eli reached into his satchel and pulled out the scorched map. If I turn this in, the railroad will have to stop. They'll have to admit this land belongs to your people. Ciala smiled faintly. Maybe. But a map's only as strong as the heart that holds it. They left the red mountain behind. At the edge of the forest, a black horse waited, wild-eyed but calm, as if it had known they would come. Eli helped Ciala into the saddle, then climbed up behind her. They rode west. The sun spilled fire across the sand, painting the desert in gold and blood. Eli looked back once. The cave mouth had sealed into shadow, but he could still hear it. The whisper of water, steady and alive, like the heartbeat of the earth. Beyond boundaries, he murmured. That's where two souls begin. Ciala leaned her head against his shoulder. Together, they rode into the horizon, leaving behind a desert reborn, where land, water, and blood had fused into one story no map could ever hold. The fire has gone out, but its warmth lingers, like red ash after the evening wind. The journey of Eli Nash and Ciala Greywind wasn't just a battle between man and the land. It was a story of courage, love, and redemption. A reminder that faith can outlast any border. Amid smoke and loss, they found something no compass could measure. An eternal belief between two souls who refused to give up on hope. If you've ever witnessed a love, a promise, or a memory the world tried to bury, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and spread this tale, so more hearts can hear the stories of the Wild West that still burn with humanity. Because sometimes, what's left after the last gunshot is the silence that refuses to be forgotten.